Great film based on real events, but this is quite different. Not the inspirational true story. This is a cautionary tale. It's a true crime thriller.
There are names in Hollywood that carry a certain kind of weight. Names that feel familiar, warm, almost like family. Ron Howard is one of those names. For most people, he's the freckle-faced kid from Mayberry, the wholesome Richie Cunningham from Happy Days, or the genius director behind some of the most celebrated films in cinema history. He's the guy who seems like he has it all figured out: the career, the family, the legacy. But here's the thing about picture-perfect images. The more carefully they're constructed, the more they hide. And for nearly 50 years, Ron Howard has been hiding quite a lot. Now, piece by piece, the silence is breaking. And what's coming out is not the feel-good Hollywood story you were expecting. This is the real Ron Howard story. The one with bullying co-stars, dangerous fires, death threats, financial betrayals, and personal heartbreak. The one that was buried beneath decades of box office numbers and award show speeches. Sit tight, because this is going to change the way you see one of America's most beloved directors forever. To understand Ron Howard, you have to go back to the beginning. Not the glamorous beginning, the real one. Ron was born in 1954 in Duncan, Oklahoma, to a family that had very little. His father, Rance Howard, had just left the Air Force and was desperately trying to carve out a life as an actor and writer. The family wasn't just struggling, they were drowning. And in 1958, with nothing but ambition and a 4-year-old son, they packed everything they owned and drove to Hollywood. Think about that for a moment. No guarantees, no connections, no safety net, just a tiny house in Burbank, mounting debt, and a dream that most people would have abandoned within a year. But here's where it gets complicated immediately. Ron's parents made a decision that nearly broke them financially. They refused to let him act full-time until he was 5 years old. They turned down paying roles. They pawned their possessions. They accumulated debt equivalent to $5,000 in today's money, all because they wanted to protect their son from the brutal machinery of child stardom. It was a noble choice. But Hollywood doesn't reward nobility easily. Ron's first real on-set experience arrived with the 1959 film The Journey. He got his first screen credit. His name was in the credits for the very first time. It should have been a celebration. Instead, it became one of his earliest wounds. Crew members mocked him mercilessly. They targeted his red hair and freckles, calling him a freckle-faced freak in front of everyone. A young child, just trying to do his job, being torn apart by grown adults for the way he looked. His father, Rance, had to physically confront these crew members, risking the entire job. A job that paid barely $12,000 but meant everything to the family, just to defend his son's dignity. That moment set a template that would follow Ron Howard for decades. The idea that success and cruelty could exist in the exact same room. That you could be doing everything right and still be someone's target. By 1960, at just 6 years old, Ron was cast as Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. 249 episodes. A national sensation. A beloved character that millions of Americans invited into their living rooms every single week. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale. From the inside, it was something far more complicated. Andy Griffith became both a mentor and a father figure to young Ron. Their bond was genuine and deep. But even that relationship carried shadows that Ron didn't talk about publicly for years. Griffith struggled with alcoholism. There were angry outbursts on set that unsettled the entire cast and crew. There was a moment where Andy publicly read a harsh review aloud and visibly fell apart, the cheerful, unshakable TV dad crumbling right in front of everyone. Ron watched all of this as a child, absorbing lessons about fame and fragility that no school could ever teach. He was growing up fast, too fast, memorizing long scripts, meeting brutal schedules, delivering perfect performances again and again with no live audience, no applause, no immediate feedback to tell him he was doing okay. Just cameras, producers, and the relentless pressure to be exactly what everyone needed him to be. And through it all, he kept smiling. Because that's what Opie did. That's what Ron Howard did. He kept the pain private and the performance public. It's a habit he would carry for a very long time. In 1973, Ron Howard was 20-something years old and trying to prove he was more than just a child star. American Graffiti was supposed to be his launchpad, a critically important film directed by a young George Lucas that would go on to become a genuine classic. What happened off-camera during that production is something Ron Howard didn't speak about publicly for decades. And when the details finally came out, they were genuinely shocking. Co-stars Harrison Ford and Paul Lumet subjected Ron to sustained, deliberate bullying. Not just the kind of rough teasing you might brush off. We're talking about throwing beer bottles near his car, locking him inside a trailer specifically to make him miss rehearsals, spiking his drinks. Why? Because Ron had been a child star. Because he was Opie. Because in the hierarchy of Hollywood's unspoken social code, having been beloved on television as a kid apparently made you a target for ridicule among people who consider themselves more serious artists. Ron called it his only experience of Opie shaming. And the phrase alone tells you everything. The way his childhood success was used as a weapon against him, as if growing up in front of cameras was something to be ashamed of rather than something remarkable. He endured it silently. He completed the film. He earned $10,000, a modest flat fee, while American Graffiti would go on to gross over $115 million in the United States alone. And he kept his mouth shut about what had happened, unwilling to tarnish the film's legacy or expose himself to further ridicule. Harrison Ford eventually apologized. Years later, Ford acknowledged the damage his behavior had caused and expressed genuine remorse. The apology brought some resolution, but the scar remained. And it fundamentally changed something in Ron Howard. It shifted how he thought about trust, about power dynamics on set, and about the kind of environment he wanted to create when he was the one in charge. There's a direct line between the bullying Ron experienced on American Graffiti and the director he became, someone known for maintaining calm, respectful, controlled sets. Sometimes our wounds quietly become our values. By 1974, Ron Howard had found new stability as Richie Cunningham on Happy Days. The show was a hit from the very first episode, pulling in 11 million viewers. It felt like solid ground after years of uncertainty. Then Henry Winkler arrived, and everything shifted. The Fonz became a cultural phenomenon almost overnight. By 1976, Happy Days was drawing 31 million weekly viewers, and Winkler's leather-jacketed rebel was the reason why. ABC executives, smelling money, pushed to rename the entire series Fonzie's Happy Days. The show's original heart, Richie Cunningham, Ron Howard, was about to be written out of the title entirely. Ron Howard drew a line. He told ABC directly, "Change the name and he walks." It was a bold move, the kind of thing that could have ended his career if it backfired. But the public responded furiously. Over 10,000 letters flooded ABC, demanding the show keep its name. The network backed down. Ron won. But winning on Happy Days came at a complicated price. Because beneath the record-breaking ratings and the $50 million a year revenue machine, the set was quietly fracturing. Ron was earning $25,000 per episode. Henry Winkler was taking home $75,000. Anson Williams, who played Potsy, was earning even less than Ron. The pay disparities were stark, and they created resentment that simmered for years. In November 1976, Williams walked off set during a shoot, reportedly furious that a scene had been rewritten to favor Ron's character. Rumors of fights and deep personal resentments circulated constantly, though the network worked hard to keep all of it buried to protect their merchandise empire. In 2012, Williams and other former cast members sued CBS over unpaid royalties from Happy Days merchandise, royalties that had been owed for decades. Ron wasn't personally involved in the lawsuit, but in 2025, he admitted openly that the disputes had nearly destroyed friendships he had built during the show's golden years. People saw the shiny nostalgia of Happy Days. They didn't see the fractures underneath. When Ron Howard transitioned to directing, he didn't leave the chaos behind. In many ways, he walked straight into more of it. His directorial debut, Grand Theft Auto in 1977, was shot on a shoestring budget of $600,000. It earned $15 million at the box office, a genuine success. But during production, a stunt accident seriously injured crew member Paul Bartel. Ron was terrified his directing career was finished before it had truly started. A lawsuit followed, quietly settled in 1978. The incident shook him deeply and became the foundation of his lifelong obsession with on-set safety. Then came Backdraft in 1991, a firefighter drama that required real fire, lots of it. And on July 23, 1990, during production, an uncontrolled fire broke out on set. Kurt Russell suffered severe burns to his hand and face. 3 other crew members were also injured. An OSHA investigation followed, uncovering serious safety violations. The production had been operating without adequate precautions. Ron later admitted they genuinely never knew when the fire might spiral beyond their control. That confession is chilling when you sit with it, a major Hollywood production, real flames, and the director acknowledging they were, at times, simply hoping for the best. Backdraft still earned $152 million and received an Oscar nomination. But those numbers don't capture the human cost that nearly accompanied them. During Apollo 13 in 1994 and 1995, the pressure came from a different direction. Tom Hanks, committed to absolute authenticity, demanded the script match NASA's exact transcripts down to the finest detail. The resulting conflicts were intense enough that production actually shut down for a period in October 1994, costing approximately $2 million. Ron nearly walked away from the entire project. NASA employees had to step in and mediate between artistic vision and scientific accuracy. The film eventually earned $355 million worldwide and won 2 Oscars. But it came within days of never being finished at all. While making Ransom in 1996, Ron Howard's professional pressures became deeply, terrifyingly personal. On Valentine's Day, he received threatening letters targeting his children. Suspicious vehicles were spotted outside his family home. The FBI became involved, and Ron was forced to temporarily relocate his entire family in March for their safety. No arrests were ever made. The threat was never fully resolved, just managed, endured, and moved past. The experience left a permanent mark. Ransom became an intensely personal project for Howard in ways the audience never knew. The film grossed over $300 million worldwide. But behind every frame of that thriller was a director who had spent months genuinely afraid for his family's safety. During the 1985 production of Cocoon, a fired extra named Harold Jenkins sent death threats to Ron and the entire crew, claiming the film disrespected elderly people. Fox had to spend $150,000 on round-the-clock security. Jenkins threatened to disrupt filming and demanded script changes and a delayed release. Cocoon ultimately earned $85 million and won 2 Oscars. But it was surrounded by genuine fear for months. This is the version of Hollywood success that never makes it into the acceptance speeches. By 2006, Ron Howard had reached the pinnacle of his profession. He had an Oscar for Best Director. He had a string of massive commercial and critical successes. He was, by any measure, one of the most powerful and respected filmmakers alive. And then he made the Da Vinci Code. The backlash was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The Catholic Church condemned the film. Religious groups around the world organized protests and called for bans. Bomb scares disrupted premieres. Death threats arrived. Ron Howard was forced to hire personal bodyguards just to attend his own film's public events. In Italy, Howard and author Dan Brown came dangerously close to facing arrest over unauthorized filming permits, a bureaucratic nightmare layered on top of an already explosive cultural situation. The Vatican publicly discouraged Catholics from watching the film. Religious leaders called it morally offensive and a twisted assault on sacred tradition. And yet, the film earned over $760 million worldwide. The paradox of massive public outrage and massive commercial success existing simultaneously is something Hollywood rarely knows how to process. Ron Howard lived inside that paradox for years. Then came The Good Lie in 2014. 54 Sudanese refugees filed a lawsuit against Imagine Entertainment, Ron Howard's company, claiming their real-life traumatic stories, starvation, escape from militias, profound personal suffering, had been exploited without fair compensation or the promised support. Filed in Atlanta, the case cast a long shadow over a film that had been presented as a humanitarian project. Ron was not personally named, but the reputational damage was significant and deeply uncomfortable. The case settled confidentially in 2017, and in 2018, Howard stepped into the Solo, a Star Wars story crisis, taking over after the original directors were fired mid-production. He essentially rebuilt 70% of the film. The budget ballooned to $275 million. Fans were furious. Critics accused him of sanding away the original director's distinctive edge and replacing it with something safe and generic. The film earned nearly $400 million internationally, but fell far short of Star Wars expectations, and the backlash against Howard's role was fierce and public. Through all of this, the bullying, the accidents, the lawsuits, the death threats, the controversies, one constant remained: Cheryl Allie Howard. Ron met Cheryl in high school in Burbank. Their first date was in November 1970. The road to marriage wasn't smooth. There were tabloid rumors. There were 3 rejected proposals before she finally said yes in October 1974, and there were genuine financial hardships in those early years. Ron was delivering newspapers in the early 70s, making just $150 a month. A car accident in 1971 left him with whiplash and $3,000 in medical bills. He sold his bicycle to help cover costs. They married in 1975. They raised 4 children. In 2025, they celebrated 50 years of marriage, an achievement so rare in Hollywood it borders on miraculous. Ron has been candid that his marriage is the foundation everything else was built on. Without Cheryl, the weight of everything the story has described, the childhood cruelty, the on-set dangers, the threats, the controversies, might have simply been too much. His father, Rance, passed away in 2017 at the age of 89, still acting until nearly the end. Ron publicly honored him as the man who first believed in the dream, who stood up to cruel crew members when Ron was just a child, who chose to stay in Hollywood when walking away would have been so much easier. And in 2025, his daughter Bryce Dallas Howard openly acknowledged on a podcast what the family had long navigated quietly: the reality of nepotism, of doors that open because of a last name, of advantages that exist whether you asked for them or not. Her honesty was praised by many and challenged by others. But it represented something new for the Howard family: a willingness to speak plainly about how Hollywood actually works, rather than protecting the image. Ron Howard's story is not the one that gets told at tribute ceremonies. It's not the one written on plaques or celebrated in retrospectives. It's the one that happens between the frames, in the trailers where bullies locked him in, on the sets where fires raged out of control, in the letters that threatened his children, in the lawsuits that followed him across decades. It is a story about the extraordinary cost of building something lasting in an industry designed to consume people. It is a story about resilience that isn't glamorous. It's quiet, stubborn, and sometimes painful. Ron Howard kept silent about so much for so long because that's what